Wow, I'm so happy to be here. Hi, I'm Cleo. I am, hi. And I am here with my incredible friend Symone Sanders. Hello. I am so excited she gets to join me because we are going to be talking about the power of individuality, and I'm so thankful to Aerie for creating not only the Aerie Real Role Model program, but also creating nights like this so that we can really get in community to each other and talk about real things that are really important to us and can really help us along our journeys so that we can support each other better and kind of be in this world together better. So before we start off, I just want to ask, can everyone in this room give the person next to them a hug and make sure you know their name?
Oh, everyone was so excited. Hi, I'm Symone. I think that's so great.
I'm gonna sit down and we're gonna get to it, but I just want to give you a little bit of info on Symone. So many of you have probably seen her on CNN. She is someone who you know how every now and again you see someone and then you just basically stalk them into being your friend? That is what I did with Symone. I just kept seeing her, and every time I saw her, I was like, oh, I really want to be friends with her. And then finally one day I was like, can you just please be my friend? Because she is so smart, and she is a history-making woman. She is one of the youngest women to ever be a press secretary for a presidential possible candidate in the primaries, and really honestly one of not only the smartest women I know, but I will say that probably of all of my friends, one of my most inspiring, because she really inspires me to be more boldly myself, which is why she was who I specifically wanted to have a conversation about the power of individuality and how that's not something you have to hide when you walk into a room, but actually something that really should be what firmly plants you in the rooms we walk into. So I'm going to sit down now and get to it.
Yay, Cleo! Well, I'm Symone, and I'm so excited to be here. I think we're gonna chat for a little bit, and I think we're gonna take some crowd questions at the end, maybe, if we're feeling froggy. So we're here with Aerie.
Yes.
The Aerie Real Role Models. What does it mean for you to be a real role model? Like, this is cool. Like, if you go on the Aerie website, Cleo is literally on the website, just looking so fabulous. I was like, you look like you were just living your best life in the middle of a cornfield in Nebraska, because I'm from Nebraska. And she's like, I was in Scotland. So what does it mean to you to be a role model? And not just any role model, but an Aerie Real role model.
Well, I mean, it was funny because the first thing Symone said when we talked, and she's like, girl, I saw you on the website. I was like, thank you so much. Well, it's really important to me. I think that as you can relate also as a woman of color, it's, you know, when we were growing up, we just didn't see ourselves really being celebrated. We didn't see ourselves on billboards as a standard to be celebrated. Instead, it was either novelty or the one in the back. And so for me, so much of the decisions I make as a woman now have to do with asking myself, how would this, am I doing this for 8-year-old me? Would she be proud of this decision? Would she be able to find herself and think, oh, I can do that, and not have to struggle for 20 years to figure it out? Because I think in this day and age especially, the earlier that we can know that we are worthy of taking up space on this planet, the better off we are. And I think especially as women and women of color or people who find themselves either underrepresented or not represented at all in our media, you know, if we can cut out some of that journey time of finding worthiness, our entire civilization is better for it.
So better. I think it's crazy though, because part of that looking for worthiness is because so many people have been told that we have to wait for somebody to validate us. Yeah. Like I've talked to Cleo about this, that when I decided I wanted to do communications, and before I used to work for Bernie Sanders, and before I got on the Sanders campaign, I went on like 27 interviews, to the point where people were like, oh, communication seems fun and nice, but maybe that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And then when I finally got the random call
To be not just work on the team, but be the director.
Be the director.
And
like,
be the face.
I had to ask for it, though. No one was going to just, like, make me the press secretary. I remember sitting in a room with the senator, and we got in an argument, and I was like, oh, he's not going to hire me either. But I was like, since I'm here, I might as well tell you what I think. And I remember sitting there with him, and at the end, we reconciled, so he wasn't mad. And he said, I think I like you. I was like, I think I like you, too. He's like, I think I want you to work here. I was like, I think I want to work here. And he was like, well, do you have an idea what you like to do? And none of the other interviews I ever went on ever asked me that. And I said, yeah, I want to be the national press secretary. I want to do cable television. I want to be your on-the-record spokesperson. I want to have a hand in the messaging strategy, just like we discussed right here. He kind of looked at me, and he was like, have you ever done cable television before? I said, no, sir, but I think I'd be very good at it. And he laughed. And then a couple days later, they called me back and told me that, like, that's the job that I had. And I realized that I think after 27 interviews, I just had to say, this is what I want to do, and I think I can do it. Yeah. But I think it's really about not waiting on other people to validate us and finding validation in our circles or in the work that we do. Because sometimes if we wait on somebody to validate us, for some of us, no one ever will.
Yeah, and also I think finding co-dreamers in that journey. Because a lot of the times and what I think was felt so special about doing this kind of collaborative effort with Aerie is that, it was about, this is the dream of how we want girls to feel. And I was like, that matches my dream of how we want girls to feel. Like, let's dream this thing together and let's create these spaces together and let's create this messaging together. And I think that is also so special. And I think that especially during these times when you see brands rising to that occasion is so critical, because for so long, unfortunately, brands have been the ones responsible for making us feel invalidated or making us feel unworthy or making us feel unseen or unheard. And so what's so special is to watch brands actually do the work now.
That they're leading.
Yeah.
Let's give a round of applause for Aerie for leading. Shout out to Aerie for leading.
And being co-dreamers in that, so that, we can claim those spaces. I often say that, self-care is not something you have, it's something you claim. And I say that, our dreams are not something you have, they're something you claim. You had to claim that dream, and then you find that if you claim it, the space creates itself.
It opens up.
Exactly.
I feel like I claim dreams every day.
Yeah.
But how do we encourage people? I think it's one thing. I think people see us talking about claiming your dreams and being an individual and walking your truth in who you are. And they say, oh, well, that's easy for Cleo Wade. It's Cleo Wade. They say, oh, that's easy for Symone Sanders. She's Symone Sanders. And so maybe give an example of when you maybe you encountered adversity, or it wasn't always so easy, if you will, for you to walk in your truth of who you really are. And then I'll give one. But you go first, because I'm the moderator.
Well, all the time. When I wanted to be a poet for a living, no, I did not look around and anyone had that job. And I saw no one making a living doing that. And it was far before poetry was something that has now become, kind of a trend, but still niche. And I think that, but at the time, it just did not exist. It was not something, and I remember, I had I was making a living in New York, working as a creative in the fashion world, and I told my parents, I was like, I really want to write poetry. I just feel called to I was like, beyond that, one day I just realized, I was like, I asked myself, what was the thing I was the most proud of in my life? And I was like, well, the thing I feel the most proud of is actually the type of friend I am, how I am able to show up in friendships. And then my next question was, well, how can I find a way to do that every day? And I realized that if I could find a way to treat every single person in the world as if they were my best friend, then I could do the work in the world that truly gave me joy. And then my next question was like, well, what's the sharpest tool in my toolkit to execute that, which was my words. And so that's why I started writing poetry. But I remember even telling my parents, I was like, I think I want to be a poet. And they were like, I don't understand. What do you mean? Like, who even says that? What are you think? Like how? And I was like, I think that there's just different ways to do it. I think that there's different ways to message and create tools to allow people to feel safe and empowered and kind of deserving of space in our world. And I think that I can be a part of that journey with people. And no one believe, like even my parents who are, they kind of have to believe in you. They were still kind of like, okay, but don't quit your day job.
Oh no.
And
did lots of people tell you that? People that cared about you told you that, hey, this sounds cool, Cleo, but
yeah, they were
go
like,
to work.
It'll probably be a cute hobby, and so I just kept working on it, and I just kept kind of really I kind of turned to having a relationship with my words, which is, I think, what strengthened my ability to use them, because if I tried to let the dream be outside of me actually just being able to do it, then I was just finding naysayers pretty much everywhere. Even so, my best girlfriends were like, yeah, I think I could be part of something you do, because no one saw it, and I don't blame them. And sometimes what's interesting is that you have to believe in yourself even more than the people who believe in you.
Absolutely, because sometimes the people, like you said, they just can't see it. They cannot see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
And for some folks, it's not their job to see it.
And they're not, and maybe no one's going to have as clear of a vision for your life. Or a clearer vision for your life than you. And that's something that we have to respect.
That's a gym, ladies and gentlemen. That's a gym. Tweet that.
The way the world works. And I feel like I face it every day. It's so interesting because there really is no there, because you don't also get to a place of success and then stop hitting kind of these people who challenge every aspect of who you are. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll walk in. If we do a panel, we've done panels together, and I'll walk in if it's in a political space, and maybe a space that I always say that I guest star as a space in. I don't regularly live in, but because my work has translated to there, I'll be in those spaces. And I can't tell you how people will give me the cold shoulder or just assume that I'm not smart because I talk about feelings and emotions, and I put love before anything, and I'll walk into those spaces, and they will really not give me the time of day until then after the panel, and they're like, that was actually really good. And then I'll hear that political person or that professor later quote my actual work and something they were doing, and
I've witnessed this. I have literally witnessed this.
And I've been like, wow, and so you are constantly, even if someone thinks that only Cleo can do that because Cleo can do that, or Symone can do that because Symone can do that. People who are even established in certain fields walk into other rooms where they're not, and they're completely erased or kind of unacknowledged, and nobody cares, and dismissed actually for being, the one who talks about love, or the one who likes to wear red lipstick, so you couldn't possibly be all the other things that women can be. And I think that that's also just a testament to the fact that for so long, women have been told that they can't be more than one thing at a time. My friend Sade always says the goddess has many faces. And I love that, because it really expresses just how layered and nuanced the female journey is, and how it has not been allowed to be. I mean, one of my favorite things about watching you work is that I don't see anyone else on television who looks like you or talks like you, and you are saying the things that I wish I was brave enough to say, and that actually everyone in the room wishes they were brave enough to say, and it's the smartest, sharpest kind of commentary on what's happening in our world. But if it wasn't up to you to say I belong on in this space, who knows if
I wouldn't be there. I think the thing you said about continuing to know that this is what you want to do, and although all the people that care about you, and even the people that don't care about you, are telling you that maybe this isn't what you're supposed to be doing, you stayed the course anyway. We wouldn't be sitting here with this amazing book if you didn't. I readily identify with that. Like, I'm glad you think I'm great, but there were literally, I had the top agent. There are only a couple agencies out there, so it's not too hard to figure out who, but one of the top agents, someone hooked me up with them early on when I left the campaign trail, and I was still doing television, and I realized that I kept showing up to do TV, but there were other people showing up getting paid, and I wasn't getting paid. So maybe I could get paid, because I'm a millennial and I want to pay my rent.
Yeah.
That's really where
And
the
even if
TV
you were
contract
a millennial,
came
you
from.
probably want to pay your rent.
Okay, like I want to pay my rent. So that's where the TV contract came from. I was like, oh, I can get paid doing this because this is work.
Right.
And I remember I talked to agents, and one of the first agents I spoke to very high up, they told me that I wasn't palatable enough for cable television. And I was like, oh. This is after I had been on TV for like a year already, doing, fronting the campaign, and when I left the campaign, just
And by the way,
still
if you've been on
on.
TV for a year, that means you kept getting asked to go back on TV,
Which
which
means
means
you
that
weren't
people kept
palatable.
looking. Yeah.
But she literally told me I wasn't palatable enough for cable television.
By the way, who says that? You know what I mean? Like,
People.
this is the world we live in. It is so awful.
The same people that told you that poetry could be a hobby.
Yeah.
The same people that told you poetry was a hobby, and you literally, no one is going to read your book.
Or literally, I mean, I had even my publishers, I had people from the publishing house, I had people from the thing that were like, are you sure you want to write this book? It definitely won't sell. Like, that's why literally, like, after the first 2 weeks of being sold, it had, like, national bestseller, and I was like, they were like, it shouldn't have the advice part, or maybe you should take out your handwriting, because, traditional poetry books are having a moment right now, so you could probably sell a few of them if you just made them look like Rupi's book, or if you just made it look like so-and-so's book. They're like, but we don't even know where to put this in a bookstore. Like, are you sure you want to make this book? This is after I was already on the way to making it, and I probably cried every day making this book, so it's truly like a labor of love, because it was one of those things where every day I was challenged by someone saying it didn't belong in the spaces, people aren't going to understand it, they're not going to know what to do with it, it's not on trend, and that's when you really have to ask yourself, you're like,
is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Well, beyond that, I was more like, I'm not here to create things that fit into the world that we are living in. I'm here to put things into the world that I want to see, because if you just make things for the world we are living in, you are saying that the world we are living in is okay the way it is. And I just don't think the world is okay the way it is.
Me either.
So we have to create, whether it's, with our voices, whether it's with our, our, whatever your talents are, whatever you feel, have that radical act of putting into the world the things that we need, the things that we need to see. Because that's so critical. I mean, every young black girl in Nebraska needs to see you on television.
I want young girls all over to see me. I remember I used to watch TV. I used to watch the news as a kid because that's what I did. And I would watch the cable news shows, and I would watch the pundits, and I would always watch these segments, and I would remember saying, well, why would they say that? Why didn't they say this? They should have said that. I can say it better. And so now I really hope that there's some little girl out there all over the country, some little black or brown girl, maybe not so black or not so brown girl, that's saying, I like Symone Sanders, but I can say it better. Because that's what this is about. I hope that there's some little girl in Scotland that read this book, that saw you in the field, in this prairie field of corn, that's not corn because there's no corn in Scotland. And it's like, I like Cleo's poetry book, it was great. But I think I could write a better poetry book, because that's what this is about. Here are my edits. That's what this is really about.
But that's also why things like, role model culture is so important. Because what's been happening in the world we're living in is we have become really confused. We have started to believe that just because you have eyeballs on you, that you're a role model. And the thing about someone who's a role model and someone who isn't is that people who are role models, they wake up every single morning and say to themselves, I am going to take responsibility for the next generation, and I'm going to make sure that my journey can be something that they can work with and from on their own journey. And I think that the reason that I was so obsessed with being able to do this campaign and work with Aerie in this way is because I'd been speaking about role model culture for a long time, because I was like, we've just been confused. Because also what happens is that you have these celebrities who will, constantly are saying like, I'm not a role model. And we're like, you're right. And just because you had eyeballs, we shouldn't have given that to you, because
you didn't earn it, and you don't want it, and you're not going to work for it.
Right. And then we can let you do you, right? We can say you actually get up in the morning and your goal is to be a businesswoman. So we can applaud you for that effort and allow you to sit in that space. But a role model wakes up and says, I know that my life is a template. And so I know that it is a starting place for some young girl somewhere or some young person somewhere to begin. And then obviously you want them to then bust open that template and then turn it into something that is bigger and better than you could have ever done in your own lifetime. But I think about people like whether it's Gloria Steinem or Alice Walker or James Baldwin, before I knew who I was, their lives were my template. That is where I started. I was like, gosh, if I really want to be an activist and pay attention to our world, and I was like, how Gloria Steinem organized people. I understand how to do that. I'm going to start there.
Yes.
And then I was like, James Baldwin, he really had this way of being able to write words in a way that could really move your thinking on something. It could really tell, like, you could have been thinking about it one way, it turned it upside down, and then gave you a whole new way to think about it. And so I wrote like that for a long time, where Alice Walker, I'd be like, or Maya Angelou, I'd be like, wow, there's this really grounding way where you can use really simple language and connect it to nature so that the way that you're processing your emotions or the way that the world works actually feels calming and natural. And so those are the places I was able to start because those templates existed, because they were role models. And so I think that it's really important that for people of our generation to, really put the women that we wake up in the morning being in front of as many people as possible, because young people need those role models. They need that starting place. And I think that if you feel in your heart that you want to be a role model, because by the way, I didn't always want to be. So I know the difference between waking up and wanting to be a role model and, maybe not having the self-care or the self-love or the understanding or being willing to take on the sacred task of becoming a role model. I know what it feels like to not be there yet. So I remember in my life when I was in my mid-20s and being like, this is important to me. There are too many people paying attention to what I'm saying and doing for me to take it lightly. And I really changed the way I lived. I started composting. I started recycling. I stopped eating animals. I
tried to save the planet.
Yeah, but you start to think about all the things you want to do because you're like, people are paying attention and they deserve the best I can give them with my life. Because, at the end of the day, our roles on this planet is not just to have joy in our lifetime, but to make this world inheritable for the next generation. I mean, even if we can't make it better, we should at least be able to make it inheritable.
We should at least make sure it's still here.
Right.
It's the least we could do.
Like,
the least.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this concept of, because when we talk about bringing our whole selves into the space that we're in, and we just...
Wait, hold on. Before we do.
Wait, what?
Can you tell them about the necklace?
Which necklace?
Your necklace.
The feminist one?
No, with the name.
Oh, Donna Burns. Oh.
Okay, so just because as she was talking about being a young girl watching the news, I was reminded of the story she told me once about this necklace she has. Okay, you tell it. It is so funny.
So I have this necklace. First of all, shout out to all the little Etsy websites and places where you can go and get a very quick necklace made. I live for them. I have necklaces for everything. I have some that say vote. I have one that says feminist. And I have one that says Donna Burns.
So who is Donna Burns?
Donna Burns is my TV personality when I was a kid. I kid you not. My mom said that I would come into the kitchen and I would get a spoon or a bottle or something and say, "This is Donna Burns reporting live from WGC3," and then that I would be the news. So I find it so funny that now I don't have to pretend to be Donna Burns because I am Symone Sanders.
Yes.
But I saw I put this into practice. So that's why representation is so important. Yeah. But that's why also walking into a space as your full self is so important. And I think folks really need to, it is work to get comfortable with yourself, but I think everybody should be willing to put in the work and feel emboldened to do the work to feel comfortable. How many times do we go, I just think about the example that I gave when I sat down with Bernie. How many times do we go into somewhere and we ask for the thing right up under the thing that we want because we don't think somebody's going to give us the thing that we really want? Because we're scared to ask for what it is that we really want because we don't feel like we deserve it. We don't want to seem overbearing or too pushy or whatever it is. But being your true self, bringing your whole self into the space is asking for what it is that you really want. I talk a lot about not having a work voice.
Oh, I love that.
You know what the work voice is, ladies. You know, the thing that you put on to seem really nice and unassuming.
Like you answer
the
phone.
Office.
Hi, hello.
How are you? Or but you don't really sound like that. Y'all do not sound like that. Who sounds like that? So I threw my work voice away a long time ago. I really did.
Everyone's laughing because they're like, "Oh my God, my work voice."
Throw your work voice away, folks. We got to throw our work voices away. We can't talk about being our full and authentic selves and truly being role models if we're also not willing to acknowledge all the things we put on every day and before we go out into the world. So what's something you stopped putting on? You probably stopped putting it on a long time ago.
Well, can I tell you one of my favorite things with the campaign is that, that there's no Photoshop used in any way.
Yes, no Photoshop. Is there
Photoshop.
makeup? Light makeup. You at least got to have some banana powder.
You use it a little.
I'm just saying, just a little banana powder, ladies. We cannot go on camera without banana powder, ladies and gents.
But I can't tell you how many times people would say to me, even still if I sit down in a hair and makeup chair, they're like, you want me to blow dry your hair out, right? And people really just, like, recently, because, being able to have your naturally curly hair, as whether you're a black woman or a Jewish woman or of any nationality, that this is your natural texture, it has finally become like some in or
it's on trend.
It's on trend.
Natural hair is on trend. Big curls are on trend.
Natural. But how crazy is it that something that has the word natural in it would be on trend, right? Because shouldn't something that's natural just always be on trend and in, because it is just reality? And so recently people have started being like, oh, your hair is amazing, but forever they would be like, oh, we should blow dry this out, or like, oh, it's so frizzy. And I'm like, my hair actually isn't frizzy. I'm a black woman. Like, this is the texture of my hair. And a lot of the times when I hear young girls be like, oh, I've got frizzy hair, or like when I think about hair commercials when I was growing up, and everything was just like, take this frizzy mess. And then all of a sudden it was like, shh, blow dry, and have it be like Pantene da-da-da. And you're like, but what was actually wrong with, it being in its natural state, and why is it always more beautiful and or professional if it looks like this? Why is it that if you actually have your natural hair, that somehow that's not professional to go to work with? And that is like what really upsets me, especially when in our culture, when we watch things become trendy, like natural hair or cornrows, when there are kids and young girls getting kicked out of school for having cornrows because they're saying that this hair isn't appropriate for school, which is just a way that women of color have been, putting their hair back for years, out of just convenience.
Like goodness, I haven't always been bald, y'all. And I used to rock a braid or two.
Yeah.
Okay, a box braid, because it's just, it's convenient, just like a messy bun.
Exactly.
Like, cornrows were the black girl's messy bun.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Literally. Cornrows were the black girl's messy bun.
Yes.
It's a thing.
It
is
is
absolutely a thing.
And so I think that, to be able to have as a standard that I don't straighten my hair, you won't see me walking around with, having put a flat iron to my head in a big way, and I think that is something that I've become really proud of, because I feel like, I remember straightening my hair in high school. I remember thinking that I wasn't pretty enough, or there was something wrong with my characteristics, or something wrong with the way I looked, just because there weren't ad campaigns of girls that looked like me, but there were ones that looked like other girls I grew up with. And so it's really nice to kind of create this equalizer where, some young girls, based on whatever their background or race or whatever, aren't feeling just naturally more beautiful than other women because their beauty is being celebrated in one way, especially also in sizing. I mean, for so long, we have just been seeing these unattainable.
A medium was not a real medium.
Yeah.
And neither was a large.
Yeah. And also, I mean, sometimes I even get annoyed when I hear the words like, like plus size, because I'm like, there's no minus size.
There's no minus, and also the average, like a 12 is average.
Right.
A 12, like since when did 12 become, 12 and 14 is average? When did that become plus?
Right. And also, I think that in a time where we need to be, it's like, I feel like we're always trying to solve the wrong issue, because, we need to be raising young women to honor their bodies and love who they are, and celebrate culturally how they're built and how they show up in the world, and
let them know that it's okay.
Yeah, and instead we're trying to kind of, create a standard or homogenize the way that as if all women are supposed to look a certain way, act a certain way, be a certain way, or fit into clothes a certain way. And I just think that it's so unhealthy, which is why I'm so glad that there are places and spaces where people are stepping in and saying, this actually just has been the wrong way to approach things for a long time, and this is actually the right way. And if we actually want to raise healthy, confident women, this is where we need to start.
This is where we need to start. And representation matters. So we have to put folks. I hear you. I like to tell people I look like this intentionally. Like I'm bald by choice. I could grow hair, but I don't. And I think about every single time that I go do an event or I sit on a panel on television, that there are millions of people watching probably that have never seen a black person before, or that have never seen a bald black woman, or that have never seen a curvy person, period, on television, on like a primetime cable network on a regular basis. And, some days I'm like, am I too fluffy? Do I need one less burger, as my aunt would say?
The answer is no.
The answer is no, but
just enough burgers.
Just enough burgers. Sometimes vegan burgers.
Yeah, veggie burger for me.
But I think it's important that folks know that that we can be successful and we can be present in various spaces and places, in various shapes, sizes, and colors and ethnicities. And I can be bald. I can't tell you how many times I sit on a panel and then my email blows up telling me that I'm not professional. If you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, I always screenshot Lisa, whom I do not know, but Lisa emails me.
She has this one person.
Lisa is a fan.
She has this one person who emails her hate mail, and she always puts it on her.
I do, but sometimes Lisa tells me I did a good job.
She does?
One day Lisa emailed him.
How did Lisa get your email? I need to know.
I don't know. It was on my Twitter. She emailed my info account. It's on my Twitter page, and Lisa will email me relentlessly. And she'll tell me when she thinks I've done a good job, but usually Lisa will tell me that I didn't look professional enough today, that my dress color was too bold, or my nails were unprofessional. And I don't know what my nails have to do with me giving you astute political analysis for the culture, but apparently Lisa thinks it's really important, or that my hair. And I think
Lisa.
Literally, I'm always like, y'all, Lisa's back. But there are a lot of Lisas in America. There are probably people in this room that go to work with Lisas and leave every single day. Somebody's like, yes.
There was an amen corner back there.
There are folks that go to work with Lisa and Lee every single day. There are people that encounter Lisa and Lee when they're in their everyday journeys. And I think we have to, that's what I love about the talks that you do and your book and your Instagram. Y'all all follow Cleo on Instagram, right? Okay, if you don't follow Cleo, you need to follow Cleo at Cleo Wade. Hashtag Aerie, hashtag Aerie real. But what
your good friends are also
good PR people. I used to be a press secretary. I think that's what's important about the spaces you've helped curate and just make available for folks, where they can come in, where they know that they've probably encountered Lisa today and Lee yesterday, telling them that they're not enough, telling them they're not skinny enough, they don't look the part, they don't sound like what folks are supposed to sound like. And you come into a space with Cleo Wade and the Heart Talk, and you feel revitalized and rejuvenated about who you are, and knowing that you are is not just enough, but it's exactly what the world needs.
Well, that's why it's really important when I write that a lot of what I write is really minimal and leaves a lot of space for the reader, because I don't want you to feel like this is what I want you to do with the work. I want you to feel like you can do whatever you need to do with the work. And so much of, I think, especially during these times, what we need is for people to just feel empowered to show up, not being told where to show up, how, or what to do, or what their best self looks like, but to know that they are worthy of discovering that best self, and that they are capable. And a lot of the times, I think that what stops conversations between whether it's with people you don't agree with, people who are, not being kind to you, and is that we also don't allow for there to be space for that person to evolve and feel capable of changing their behavior, shifting or evolving. And also we forget that every single one of us has the power to create a new standard.
Yes,
and I think that's amazing. And that's why it was really important to me. And they were asking, like, what do you and Symone want to talk about? And I was like, we really need to talk about the power of individuality, because Symone really is a person in my life that has inspired me so much by being someone who walks into a room and is like, this is the new standard. I'm creating it right now. Just even with my body being in this room, I create it. And then what's really amazing is the way you then always make room for other people in those spaces, which is what I love so much about just the work that you're able to do.
We have to bust the door wide open. Look, I think that we have to. Look, I think that I think it's unfortunate that we have all succumbed to this idea of normalcy. And I remember in like December 2016, January 2017, I kept saying, I would go on TV and say, this isn't normal. And I want everybody to stop. I want us to erase the idea of what's normal, because the answer for anything is not that, like, a bald black woman being on TV is not that it's not normal. Like, whomever, whatever crazy thing is happening in the news is not normal. It's, for some people, they feel like it's not right. For some people, but we really should be talking about what's possible. And instead of talking about what's not normal, we should be talking about what's possible. And I think if we talk about what's possible, that opens up, that frees us up to think, to dream, to do bigger. But it also frees up folks to have really candid and constructive, maybe sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but it takes us to the next level. And then it opens up the door for some other people to get into the room. So we have to start talking about what's possible.
Well, and I think what I love so much about hearing you say that is that it also kind of incentivizes us to live with imagination.
Yes.
Because what we have to remember too is that during these times, we are building a world that has never been built before, right? We don't know what a world looks like where every role model looks like me or you or Yara or any of the amazing women who are being put on billboards or being put in high visibility. We don't know what that world looks like. We know only what the world looks like where none of us were visible or being seen or being celebrated or having amazing brands to co-dream with for the next generation. We don't know what the world looks like where certain groups aren't oppressed and we just don't know. We only know, which is why sometimes
we only know we know.
Yeah, and which is why it's so easy. Which is why sometimes it's so easy for the people who, have a lot of kind of oppressive or backwards thinking to kind of, win in ways, is because they're fighting for a world that we know what it looks like. And if we're kind of rooting and fighting for a world that, has never existed, we have to have pretty radical imagination. Yeah. Because it takes a big dream, it takes a lot of imagining, it takes a lot of new standard setting, it takes a lot of, powerful individuality. And so I love the thought of that. What's possible?
What's possible? That's what should we think about. What is possible? Let me do a time check. Okay. Are we going to do questions from the crowd? What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Andy.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, guys. It's been amazing. I'm here kind of by accident, and you're incredible.
No, thank you.
So I was actually just having this conversation with my brothers the other day. We were talking about the Colin Kaepernick campaign with Nike, and one of my brothers brought up the feeling that brands were using like social justice and movements like Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, like kind of exploiting, and they're not really coming from a genuine place. And I'm wondering like what your feelings are about the sort of mixture of those things. Like, obviously Nike wants to make money, but
Colin Kaepernick want to make a coin too.
But it also feels, I think that like brands, like you were saying, brands are coming and talking to people more authentically and maybe more, it feels like a genuine campaign. So I'm just curious how do you guys feel about the sort of middle ground of those things?
Look, I think in general, it isn't, like, we hit on it a little bit about brands leading now, but it is really important, I think, for brands to get out there and lead on issues now, depending on what brand you are and what the issue is. Like, you have to make that, companies have to make that determination. But in this day and age, I just feel like we can't sit out conversations about humanity. Like, real role models, the Aerie Real Role Models campaign is a campaign that is really about humanity. It's about representation. It's about saying, hey,
we exist.
We exist. And lots of folks exist. And they are different. They are very, like, pretty comes in all different forms, shapes, and sizes. Role models come in different forms, shapes, sizes, and even professions. And that's what the campaign is about. I think I think Nike, look, they elevated the conversation. It wasn't just Colin Kaepernick. Serena Williams is one of their spokespeople as well, and is in that campaign. And I think in that moment that we all saw on the court during the U.S. Open, where we saw that Serena was absolutely treated differently than the men that were literally on the court earlier in the day before her. That was infuriating for women all across the world, frankly. Yeah. And Nike was there to say that, you know what, we are supporting Serena. We think your voice is important, and we're standing with you. So I think brands have to get engaged and involved in some level. The issue comes, I think, when folks pop out there and folks haven't necessarily done their research. And so, like, if you saw the ad of a soda commercial where they were trying to cure police brutality with a soda, that wasn't necessarily the best move. I know you didn't mean it like that, but
and having
you trying to tell me MLK should have had a Pepsi? I don't know. I don't know.
Well, and also putting people in the space that don't do the work. So I think what's also really important to acknowledge is that don't take the agency away from the people who also sign that contract as well. So it's important to Colin Kaepernick's a really intelligent and smart person who's making very smart decisions for himself and the people that he's rooting for liberation for. And so to look at him as a pawn in Nike is also to take a lot of agency away from him. I think that these things are partnerships. It's not something where a brand is doing something to a person. And I think now more and more, especially when brands decide to collaborate with people who actually have different jobs, not someone who wears the clothing for a living. Those things are partnerships. I mean, when we decided to partner with Aerie, and I say we because my business partner Jules and I mean, we'd met with them over a year. We had talked to them. She was like, I fell in love with them. We had talked and we had so many conversations. We spent so much time researching. I called my other girlfriends who had been in the campaign. We really spend time so that we know that when we're creating these spaces together, they're authentic and they're meaningful. And I would never, especially because it's not my job, I don't wear clothes for a living. So I don't need to walk into any space and be a hanger for anything. So if I'm going to lend my voice and my time to something, it's because, we're rooting for the same things and we're on the same page. And so I think that in those spaces, a lot of the times when people are like, a brand is capitalized and it's like, well, why don't we look at that person off of, why don't we also look at it as Colin Kaepernick giving more and more visibility to his movement and the work that he's doing in the world. And I think that we shouldn't be taking that away from those people. We shouldn't be ever think that a brand is ever dominating a person, especially someone like Colin.
Right. Great question. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. What's your name?
Frankie.
Hi, Frankie.
So I have a question regarding you mentioned keeping things when you talk about things more on the humanity aspect of a conversation. So I'm a bartender, and as a female,
you get a lot of conversation.
A lot of conversation, and as a bartender and as a female bartender, there's a lot of things over the years you've been. Not taught or expected to not talk about or say about, because, I mean, that's your job and that's how you make money is by, keeping people happy and satisfied and pleased. And so obviously, like I said, as a bartender, especially as a female bartender, you obviously get some topics of conversation that are not positive or necessarily agreeable to what you believe in. And so I guess my question and sort of conversation is, at what level in your job, in your position, is there a breaking point for you where, for me, and I didn't even know it was happening when it did happen for me, the Me Too movement, I had a lot, I get a lot of patrons, and not just male patrons, female patrons too, who don't get a lot of things, had this question, like, where are all these women coming from, and why is it 30 years later, and why are they coming out of the woodwork, and I don't understand, and they're just coming out of everywhere, and everyone can just say whatever they want. And it was it was started out like a teeny little thing I'd say to like one person, and then I didn't even realize that I all of a sudden was just like I couldn't even not say anything, and I got to the point where if I lose a customer, I'm okay with it. And so I started saying like, well, they didn't have a voice then, and now they have a voice, and there's power in numbers, and this just didn't happen overnight. These are women who in the 70s and 80s would lose their job if they said anything. We're the ones that were being shamed and all of these things. And said, so I got to a point where you pick, whether it's an issue or a movement or whatever it might be, without even realizing it, I realized at one point that this was my issue, that if I lose a customer or lose a job over this, I'm okay with it. So what is there a breaking point that either of you have? Or is there an issue? Is there something that, I mean, for you, obviously, in politics, there's a lot of
breaking points.
A lot of breaking points. A lot of.
Like you broke every day. You gotta just you gotta get that crazy
a lot
glue.
Of breaking points.
The nail glue is actually very
But I
strong.
think a lot of people say, well, I'm not political. But by saying you're not political, you're also saying you're not a humanitarian. You're not human. You can't be someone who is a human interest at heart if you're not political. Because political is being human. So how do you embrace that? Or
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important. I think that's a really important question, particularly the part about. So I think, frankly, folks that say they're not political really mean that they don't like to be partisan, which is true. A lot of people don't like to be partisan, but we've been taught that or conditioned that when we talk about anything that is political, that it has to be partisan, and it doesn't. Like, being able to go to the grocery store and get green lettuce in your neighborhood is, in fact, a political decision. Like, where your banana comes from that you put in your smoothie in the morning is, in fact, political. It may not be partisan, but it's political. Being able to have health care. I like to be able to go get my birth control on time, not 3 days later. Like, that is, and for it to be free, that is political. But some people, take that as partisan. I think, so what I heard you say is that over time, you felt comfortable becoming a radical revolutionary at your job.
Sounds like if I'm just going to reduce this to one sentence.
You have felt comfortable becoming a radical revolutionary at your job. And I think what you have decided to do is really important. And I think a lot of times when we tell people, like, find your space and place in this moment, do what you feel. I think a lot of people think that means you need to, like, take up a sign and hit a march, or you need to, like, quit your job, or you need to if you feel compelled, you need to, like, be out on the streets in the die-in. And I'm going to tell you, I ain't going to the die-in because I need to be on TV telling people why y'all dying in. So that can't be the way that I participate. But I think everybody needs to find their space and place in this time to speak up about what's important to them. I think you may not change someone's mind overnight, but the fact that you are willing to engage with them and actually have a conversation, things that frankly don't get to happen nowadays sometimes. Like you meet somebody that has a different political point of view from you, or that lives somewhere different from you, we are automatically making assumptions about people every single day. But
I think the successful part for me was when someone literally said, like, oh, I never thought about it that way.
see?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Right.
I think more people should feel emboldened to do that kind of small work every single day. And to your question about the line, like, where's your line? I think we all have to find our line. Like, there are just things that I'm not going to let slide in my presence, whether I'm on television, whether I'm in a meeting, whether I'm on a conference call. There are just some things I'm not going to let slide. Now, we can't address every single little thing everywhere, y'all. We can't come for everything. We got to pick and choose when we're going to engage. But there are things that cross my line, and I think everybody has to get their line. So regardless of, I want to use Sean Spicer as an example. Regardless of how you feel about Sean Spicer, one could argue that he wasn't clear about his personal line. So as a communications person, I'm just not going to lie for anybody. I can't do it because all I have is my word. And so the day you ask me to lie is the day I can't work there anymore. So you have to find where your personal line is and then know what your action item is if somebody crosses it.
I think also it's important to ask yourself what your goal is. I mean, I think that, your life is very precious and very rare, and you only have this one for sure. So really ask yourself what you want to do with your existence and what the goal of that is. And yes, you could call it, being an activist or things that are important, or you could say, with this little body of mine, I really want to see what my voice can do and how it can help others and myself. And you can also ask yourself, do I want to be a healer? And what does it look like to move through the world healing? What do conversations with people that I agree with and disagree with look like if my goal is actually healing whatever pain might be causing them to think one way or the other? And at the end of the day, I feel like in our culture, we keep having this thing that drives me crazy is people keep saying two things. They keep saying, we need to have these hard conversations. Let's just have hard conversations. And I'm like, no. We actually need to be having healing conversations. We need to be asking each other, where does this come from? Because at the end of the day, my pain is making me feel one way and making me say that these issues are important to me because of this. And your pain is making you feel like these issues are important to you because of this. And if we can actually get to each other's pain and heal those things, I think we'd realize that we don't have to find common ground. We're standing on common ground because at the end of the day, we're standing in this country together. We are on common ground. We don't have to look for it or find it. And so I think that ask yourself, before you decide if you want to be an activist, before you decide if you want to be a role model, first and foremost, be a healer. And ask yourself what you need to heal within you so that you can do that, because healed people heal people and hurt people hurt people.
Facts.
Are we going to do
We'll
one
take
more
one
question?
more. Hi.
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 Is it working? Needless to say, the current climate can be discouraging, and I have felt myself becoming.
Are we wearing the same sweater?
I think so.
Yeah.
Love it.
I need this sweater.
I think half of this room is.
Okay.
Literally, I see this sweater in like 4 places. Clearly, this is the
We
poppin'
need
sweater
like
to
a
get.
group photo.
Yes, I agree.
That's literally the sweater.
But anyway, I have found myself becoming increasingly angry and cynical. So I guess my question is, how have you found solace while still defending yourself? And yeah.
Well, there's this page in my book that I have ripped out and sits on my inspiration board at home in my writing room, which says, not every ground is a battleground. And in it, I write that the wise soldier knows that not every ground is a battleground. Their wounds do not let them forget that they have had to fight for what is important to them, but they also remind them that it is not sustainable to live every day in the trenches. And, the ground is the place where we have to fight for what is right and fight the good fight. But it is also the place where we're being divinely held up by Mother Earth, right? And so I think that to remember to give yourself care along the way and take space to yourself. Symone has this amazing thing she does. She's like, 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Every 3. And right now, it's about once a month.
Once a month, she's like, I find a beach. And she is quite literally the person I know who is just doing the most in the space of just the constant part that I find is the most draining for all of us, because I don't think I'm alone when I say the news is pretty overwhelming. So I
don't even have cable.
Yeah. You're just on it.
Get on Twitter in the morning
and,
like everyone else. I don't have cable.
And so I think that if you can really cultivate an amazing self-care practice and routine, because, if we walk into the world loved and cared for, we are all better off because, when you are exhausted and depleted, you are defeated. You feel like nothing's ever going to change, so why should I be nice to my neighbor or go vote? You feel like nothing's ever good enough. I could never be good enough, because we're so exhausted. It is impossible to tap into optimism or hope. And a lot of the times you think that optimism and hope are these character traits that are reserved for either the superhuman or the completely delusional. But at the end of the day, we earn our hope and we earn our optimism, and we do that first and foremost by figuring out what it takes on a personal level to take care of ourselves spiritually and emotionally.
Boom.
Okay, so that was, I guess, the last question. Do I have time to read a poem? Yeah. I kind of want to read one. I'm gonna do it. Hold on, let me get this book. I don't know, I'm feeling moved. This wasn't in the run-up show.
Which poem are you going to read?
I think I'm going to read. This is not my book, so I got to find it.
Meaning it's not.
No, I mean, like, I wrote it.
I mean,
it's not the one I travel with. I don't know whose this is, but I'll sign it for you after
Can you
this.
sign mine?
Yeah, I sure will. You don't have one?
Not a signed book.
Okay, this is called The Time Has Always Been Now. The time is always right to begin. The time is always right to stop waiting on you. The time is always right to embrace your path, to accept what you had to walk through yesterday and what you must step away from now as you move toward tomorrow. The time is always right to pound your chest and let them know that you are here, to let them know that they will hear you, to let them know that they will see you. The time is always right to end your silence, to look at the person next to you and tell them to end their silence too. The time is always right to reclaim your narrative, to tell your story, to live with wild freedom in a place that asks you to control not only the way you see the world, but also the way you see yourself. The time is always right to say, I will not be a victim. I will be a survivor. I will be a savior. The time is always right to remind yourself that you are going to be okay. The time is always right to love somebody, especially if that somebody is you. The time is always right to make today the day that you proclaim that you deserve your dreams, your ideas, and your hopes. The time is always right to let waiting be something you just don't do anymore. Now is the time, beloveds. Now is the time.
Yay! Cleo Wade, everybody. Let's give 'em